coming to you from the Virginia Tech Geosciences. My name's Mike, age 23, Paleontologist Extraordinaire. And today, we're going to be looking at murder in the fossil record. We're going to look at specifically the phyla mollusca. Now what a phyla is a big general taxonomic group of organisms. The mollusks are your gastropods, cephalopods, and plesiopods. In case you don't know who they are, the gastropods, I kind of think of from the name, gastro as in gastrointestinal, you know, like, I got a gastrointestinal problem. It means stomach. Pod means foot, as in tripod. So a gastropod is someone that goes along on their belly. And those are your snails and your slugs. Specifically, we're going to be looking at sea snails because they're who we see the most of in the fossil record. Next, we have the plesiopods, who are your clams and your oysters, anything like that with these shells. And finally, you have your cephalopods, who are your squids and your octopi. You may think of them today, they're kind of squishy, so we don't see many of them in the fossil record. But what we do see are nautiloids and belemnites. Nautiloids are the ones with the big curls and all the tentacles coming out. Belemnites are the ones that have the really long cones, and again, you have little squids coming out the end. Now, when you look at just the nautiloid shell, you may think that kind of looks like a gastropod shell. And it does a little bit, but there's one main difference. If you were to open it up, you see all of these little chambers inside. That's a main difference between the shells of the cephalopods and the gastropods. The gastropods just leave it open so that way if they need to escape, they can just hightail it back into the way tip of this. Whereas the cephalopods, they're just hanging out there and they stay out. And what they do is as they seal these up, if you look, there's these little holes that connect them. There's actually a part of its body that curls around in there, and they can actually fill these little chambers with water. And because of that, just like ballast on a ship, they can control how high or how low they are in the ocean. So, that's really neat. But back to the main point, murder. Believe it or not, you can actually tell how a lot of these organisms died just by looking at the shell, because their shell is virtually a tape recorder of their entire lives. These guys just sit there and they never get rid of their shell, unlike a bug or a snake. They just keep building on and on and on. So starting with the tiny bit of shell that they're born with, called the protoconch, which sometimes you can see if you're really lucky on the shell, all the way, it'll be right there on the tip. And from there, it'll just keep building and building and building, and everything that happens to its shell is recorded for us to find and interpret. So, as you look right here on the edge, you can see all these little lines coming down. Each one of those lines, at some point or another, was this, the last lip of the shell. So, from that we can look and see, if you look at that, it's really uneven, especially right here. There's a whole big chunk missing. What happened? This guy was in a fight. This was really tough, you know. Always bumping around with other guys, and believe it or not, he's a vicious hunter. This guy is actually responsible for eating these guys, you know, a lot of the time. So you may ask yourself, how does a snail get into a clamshell? Well, what he does is he has this, on his tongue, he has little teeth. It's called a radula. And he just sits there with a little acid in his saliva and puts a little dot on the shell. And he rasps at it, and his tongue is just a constant conveyor belt of teeth. And he sits there and just grinds away at the shell until he can make it all the way through, just like this hole right there. Makes it all the way through to the other side, and then he can harpoon it and give it a little bit of poison. The clam dies, opens up, and you go in and have a tasty, tasty snack. But as you may imagine, just like trying to get through a knight's armor with a nail file, it takes a while. And while you're sitting here trying to grind away at some tasty morsel shell, you may find another gastropod, say, this one's working on this shell here, and you get some bigger one come, he's just going to knock you out of the way and bump you around. And so you have to say, there's got to be a faster way for these guys to eat. And there is. There's certain one of these shells, they actually have this special little lip on the end, if you look right here. If you kind of notice on the shell, it has this little extra bit right here. And what they do with that, these nice whelks here, they'll take the same shell, and instead of trying to drill a hole all the way through, they'll just kind of rasp at the end here a little bit with the radulas, till they get a little bit of a hole between the shells, and they cram this in like that. And just like a crowbar, they sit there and they break it open. But there's a problem with this. While it's way, way faster than just sitting there and trying to rasp away, it's dangerous. Not just for the clams, but for the gastropods.